One of the dilemmas has always been with the Egyptologists is that they have a lot of history. They have a lot of artifacts, a lot of archaeological evidence. But this brother has taken the time and he has gotten the archaeological and the anthropological information. I let him explain what those big words are because I can't hardly say them sometimes. But the archaeological, in the ground, anthropological are the bone, the mind. This brother has done it, defended it, and has gotten a lot of respect. He goes by the name DivineProspect, Brother Ron Shields. Come on up, Brother Ron Shields, in the hot seat. This is the first time we met in person, right? But we talk on the phone like we cousins.
Exactly, right.
Have a seat, my brother. How was your travel?
Interesting.
There you go.
All right, there you go. It was pretty interesting. I thank y'all for allowing me to be here safely. You know, driving from Atlanta all the way out here, we made a stop first in St. Pete, and then we came all the way out here. So, yeah, but we made it here safely, so I'm grateful for that.
We're so glad that you're here, so glad you're able to be here. Thank you for supporting through promotion efforts the Great Gathering Hebrew Conference.
Of course. When I saw who was on that, I was like, everybody got to know about this. So,
everybody got to know about this,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, yep.
Brother Ron Shields, because I did not know him at the time, Brother DivineProspect, I didn't know him. And so he was not on the agenda. But he had told me that he had subscribed to my channel, which is Pastor Johnson, by the way. That's my channel on YouTube. Trying to build up the... but anyway, all one word. I think it's one word on there, yeah. Pastor Johnson. But anyway, he had subscribed to me. And so one day I'm on there, and he comes on and he says, this is Brother DivineProspect. I saw something called Kingdom Harbinger Ministries. And so I got this brother who comes under that title, says under Kingdom Harbor Ministries, that this is Brother DivineProspect. So, you know, I said, yeah, right. But we reached out, we communicated, and we started talking, and right away, I just shared with him the respect that I had, because when you're dealing with Egyptologists trying to defend who we are, that we actually existed as a people, and that we are real, we are in the scriptures, we didn't steal nothing from you. Well, culturally things always mix, but we are who we say we are. Mm-hmm. There's only one guy that has the respect of that community. Several have the respect, but they give him the utmost respect.
I'm grateful for that.
And so I want to thank you for the work that you do and some of the things that you're doing. You've also have debated, not only on that side of the fence, but you've also debated this Rosenberg guy, Brother Harry Rosenberg.
Right after my brother Rabbi
Wekte did, the doctor, as if he didn't get enough.
Yeah.
And if you didn't think he got enough from these two guys, what Ron did to him, Ron Dalton, I thought the guy would just run away, and he still hasn't. But share with us some of the work that you've done.
Yes.
And what you continue to do.
Sure. So first I want to thank you, Pastor Johnson, for inviting me on the show. It was last minute. I just wanted to be in the audience. But Pastor Johnson said, no, I can't just have you sit in the audience. That's what he does, right? So he was like, no, I got to have you up there. And I said, all right, yeah, I'm here to serve. So if that's what you need me to do, I'll do it. You know what I'm saying? And when I saw that Ronald Dalton was going to be here, and Brother Akweti Ama and Ben Ayagas, I recently just saw it hit in Hebrews. I've had people tell me about it, and my schedule is really busy, so I didn't have the chance to watch it. But when I started watching your channel, and I heard you mention, I went to his channel, because he had put the video up when y'all had that event.
Yes.
And I watched it. I was like, oh, okay. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I got a lot of stuff to chat with the brother about. I was like, man, you know, it's an honor just to be in their company, you know, and to be able to speak with them and soak in knowledge, right? Brother Akweti Ama, been following him for Lucas. Let me tell you something real quick, right? So my thing was, I was trying to say we have to do a paradigm shift, right? Sometimes we take an orthodox route to try and resolve an issue, but then a lot of times when it comes under heavy scrutiny, we don't really have a response for it, and that's why we say apologetics, right? So I said to myself when I started to examine the cultural aspect, because if you don't understand a culture, the prophecies is not going to mean anything. Nothing. Right? Because they use cultural elements in order to tell the prophecy. So if you don't have an appreciation of the culture of those ancestors, you're going to miss the mark, right? So I said to myself, the best way to trace who we are as Israelites is to go through West Africa. Wow. And what we tend to do in our community, because there's this Hamite phobia, right? We just take a blanket term, throw it over everybody, so we don't have to acknowledge and address our people in that region, right? Because it may tell a different story that we need to reorient ourselves back to and work together. Right? So when I use that term Pan-Africanism, I'm talking about our other brothers and sisters that are there that we have to connect with. Now, in our community, we'll hear something like that and be like, oh, man, what you love the Hamites and they did A, B, and C to us. And it just goes to show the level of ignorance in our community that we have to be patient enough and work with people, right? We have to meet them where they're at, right? So I realized, I said to myself once I was doing this research, in order for me to successfully do that, right? Because it was new to me, and it still is. I'm still learning, I'm still growing. I have to meet brothers that's over there that's doing that, doing the same thing, seeing the same, you know, similarities, the same research. And that's when, I don't know how I found this brother. I found him, that's the Most High, I'll say that. And I went and watched his work. I was like, this is exactly who I'm looking for. Because I read a book, and I want to know if my brother Akweti Ama is familiar with it. It's called The Traditions and Customs of the Gadangne Peoples, right? And it says Descendants of the Ancient Israelites by a brother named Yosef Mensah. I don't know if you've read that book before. Okay. So when I read that brother's book, it opened my eyes to the Gadangne peoples. And I said, well, if only I can speak to somebody, or even see the work of somebody that's actually doing it on that angle, it would help me to grow exponentially. And the Most High brought me in touch with this brother. So one thing I've learned from my brothers and sisters over there on the other side of the coast is that your culture is fundamental to finding the designation of where you came from, and also for you to lay hold of who you are, right? And a lot of times when we leapfrog over West Africa and try to jump right into Israel, we typically do what's called the blackwashing, right? So we see what the people over there are doing, and what we say to ourselves, oh, that must be our original culture that they stole. So what we do is we see what they do, we take what they do, we blackwash it and say, well, it was really ours. And I say to them, wait a second, you didn't even use the map correctly, right? You have to go through this step, this step, this step before you can even go there to reassess what is being done. And you have to go through your brothers and sisters that have maintained the culture. And that's one and if you learn anything about the transatlantic slave trade and us being a Ma'afa here in the Americas, the only way they could subjugate us is by stealing who we are from us. And then they give us a substitute identity. And then over time, we start to live that substitute identity, and we realize why we can't get past the ceiling. Because that ceiling was designed to keep you from going any further. And what happens is we try to use the culture of this society to think that we can get above that ceiling, but then once we hit that ceiling, we keep getting that reality check. Like, remember when Oprah went overseas to go shopping? Watch this. And mind you, she's not in a black establishment. She's not in an African establishment. She's in a white establishment. And she goes to shop and she's getting a difficult, now this is Oprah. This is a billionaire over here in America. But what she doesn't realize is that culturally speaking, they don't identify with you. I don't care how much money you have, how much prestige you may have in this society. Culturally, you're not my people. So if she took that money and invested it with somebody of her own nationality, her own ethnicity, they would have treated her with more respect.
Correct.
And she
Correct.
would have had more respect for that business, and she would have invested in it.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, if we keep neglecting our brothers and sisters that's on the other side of the river, or other side of the lake or the ocean, we're doing a disservice in trying to reestablish our identity. Wow. So I thank the Most High for my brother Akweti Ama and several other brothers and sisters over there in Africa that I've been reaching out to, speaking to, that has been sending me information, even sending me invitations to fly over there. I said, listen, my schedule's busy, but I want to do that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I remember when he made that invitation, he put it out there. I'm saying, you know what? I'm going to have to go with him.
Right, right.
But I say that to say, that is the best apologetic. If you don't know who you are, you can't defend whatever you stand on.
Wow.
If you don't know where you're going, you can't defend where you stand on. If you don't know the ancient landmarks that was left so you can know the way going forward, you can't defend what you stand on. And it takes time to be able to say, look, I'm going to take the patience and I'm going to learn what I don't have. And what they've done with us is remove our culture. And Brother Akweti said it so eloquently that when they remove your culture, there's nothing you could do. What else could you fight with? Wow. You're going to use the same weapons that they're using on you, but it's going to be ineffective because you didn't create it. Wow. It didn't come from your ancestors. It's not in your DNA. Wow. So I just wanted to lay that out. Brother Ron Dalton did even before he did the new Hebrews to Negroes, he had a book out. Right. I don't know if anybody's seen that book. It's like, I don't know, how big is that book? It looked like one of those yellow pages. You ever seen the yellow pages back in the day?
Right.
But it had a lot of good information in it that I've extracted, and I say, wow, this stuff can help me with my studies, right? Sure. So the only reason why I'm acknowledged is because I stand on the shoulders of those who are also laboring. Right? And the only reason why I stand on their shoulders is because if they can boost me up higher, I can get the fruit and bring it down to them. Wow. See, we have a wrong inclination to be able to be servants and students first before we can lead and before we can teach. If you're not a servant first, if you're not a student first, don't tell me, okay, I'm teaching this, I'm teaching that. Who have you learned from lately? You know that song, What Have You Done For Me? Who have you learned from lately? Who have you served lately? And if you can't give me some names, then I'm very skeptical of the information that you're sharing. Right? So it's being able to, everybody's laboring in the yard. Some sow, some reap, some till the ground, some watch over it. Right? Because if you don't watch over it, you have the birds come in and steal it. You have an enemy come over and steal from the ground. Everybody has an integral role to play so that way we can get further and reach the mark.
Yes.
So in regards to apologetics, it's being able to defend not just what you believe, but who you are. Anybody could defend what they believe, but can you defend who you are? Wow. Because that's in your DNA. You can't remove that. What you believe is a cloak you can take off and hang up, but who you are is ingrained in your DNA. You can't remove that. Okay. Some people look at it.
I got you.
And I say that because when you defend who you are and not what you believe, it changes the game. And I realize that culture is that factor. And if you can defend the culture, not the religion, not the belief, the culture that we here in America, that we lost, that our brothers overseas, that they still have. We have elements of vestiges of it still. But in order for us to go back and retain the potency of what that culture was, we have to work together.
So that has been the strength of your debate.
Yes, correct. Because they want you to defend religion. And if you talk about religion, you're going to be philosophizing until the cows come home.
Okay.
Because everybody has an opinion.
Right.
But if you can take religion out of it and say, let's deal with the root cause.
Okay.
So in my line of work, right, I work in IT, right? I'm a solutions engineer. I work in the IT Enterprise Services Department. And my objective for my job is problem management. That means when there's an IT issue, they give it to me. Okay. No matter what it is, you got to fix it. I'm like, what? I got to fix it. So I've learned to be a good troubleshooter. And the second thing is being able to bring forth innovation so that the company can grow by means of IT. Meaning that, hey, here's a setup, a revenue center. We need to find out what's the best way to bring more revenue in by ways of IT. Okay. Why is this important? Because before I start any kind of work, I have to do what's called a root cause analysis. Which means that if a person is coming to me and they're saying to me, well, I don't believe this, and that, and this, and that says that, I'm hearing what they're saying on the surface, but there's a root cause that's feeding that problem. Wow. So now I got to manage that problem, and there's a process, a solutions process that I put it through in order to get to the root of that. Now, once I get to that root, then you can disarm whatever they're bringing at you because you realize they don't know who they are.
Correct.
See, when you're confident about who you are, people are going to be drawn to you to attack you because they don't have an identity.
Right.
They don't know who they are.
Wow.
So what they want to do is strip you so misery can love company.
Wow.
So if I can just keep, and you'll realize that people will come across the scriptures and hate the Bible and bang on the Bible all the time, and you're just sitting there very calm because you know who you are, and they don't. They're still searching. They're still seeking. They have not reached that epoch yet. So what I do is I understand that, and I try my best. People say, yo, Divine, how you sit there? And people saying A, B, and C. I said, because you realize that the most important thing I've learned in my journey is the stillness of the water.
Wow.
See, what people understand a lot is how the water rages and how the water is a very fearful thing sometimes.
Correct,
You're on those
correct.
waves and so forth. But when the water is still, there's a lot that you can learn because the distraction is no longer there. Mm-hmm. You get to really appreciate the properties that the water possesses. And Bruce Lee says something very interesting that if y'all follow Bruce Lee, he says if you take water and put it in a cup, it becomes a cup. If you take water, you put it in a pitcher, it becomes a pitcher, which means that whenever I interface with somebody, I have to not only meet them where they're at, I have to adapt to the environment that caused them to bring the concern to me.
Correct.
Right? And then once you meet them there and you start speaking to that person's soul and not just to their flesh or their argument, then you can make some headway or some.
Wow. Wow. I like that. You said something very important, because once you know and you're confident about it, we can't fall into the game of letting them attack you to throw you off track.
Exactly.
So I want everybody to know I'm not anti-Semitic by bringing this information. I want my wallet back. But I'm not anti-Semitic. I just want my wallet back. So I want to make that very clear. I am not anti-Semitic. Can we say together, we're not anti-Semitic. But we want our wallet back. That's all.
Exactly.
That's all. We're not anti-Semitic. I'm not anti anybody. I just want my wallet.
Yeah, because like Capital One, what's in your wallet?
What's in your wallet?
We know what's in it.
I know what's in your wallet. Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So you have the evidence that you put forth when you're doing these debates is from what type of perspective, what type of proof are you showing these guys when you do these debates?
Yeah, so I try to take as much of an objective approach as possible, and I try not to bring my own personal presuppositions, right? So a presupposition is something that you have been predisposed to believe to be true. You have not tried it by fire, you have not had it peer reviewed, you just believe it to be true, so you fight gung-ho for it, right? So I've learned that in these type of discussions, that is irrelevant. So I realized the best way for me to be as objective as I can be is to be able to take the data and methodology that is used in academia and be able to translate it in a way that our people can understand, right? Because this removes me from out the picture. And like I tell people all the time, when you look at academia, the objective is not their interpretation. You got to realize that academia has done a great job in categorizing, collecting, and aggregating information on everybody here. Our culture, well, yes, but then there's a issue with that is where now they can interpret it because they have the information. Once we go and seek out that information, we extract the data and we take a methodology that's going to allow us to objectively interpret the data without them. Because now, for example, my brother Akwe Amar had said something very interesting. Even my brother Benya, when he was talking about our people and our culture, if you let it be told by the people in academia, it's like they're doing a cultural study in a lab somewhere, right? Where you take in a microorganism, you put it in a petri dish, you're studying its properties, and you're just writing about it, as if it's a test study and nothing more. But yet people are living this every day, right? This is a person's identity, their livelihood. This is how they engage, socially interact. So I say this to say when a lot of and this goes back to apologetics. When we look to see when the imperialists and colonialists came into West Africa and they picked this up, one thing that we fail to realize is that the interpretation of slavery, now what they do is that they try to do a red herring. They say, oh, well, you know, Africans were selling Africans already. They'll say that. And you'll be like, oh, okay. But what they don't tell you is that in a lot of tribes, and I don't know if my brother Akweti Amar, he should be able to confirm this, their concept of slavery was different. Yes, you could be a prisoner of war. Yes, you could be a slave, but you're also given an opportunity to work your way up the ranks. In the other side, You try to work your way up the ranks, you're going to face a lot of issues. And that's what we had to deal with over here.
Right.
And then what happened was when a lot of the African tribes started to realize that, oh, you interpret slavery differently, they started to resist. And they did not want to allow the colonialists to continue to take their brothers, even though they're slaves. Sometimes they saw them as brothers, sometimes they may not. But at the same time, they had a universal humane language to know that the atrocities that we're hearing that's going on by these people that don't even look like us is an injustice to all of us. And at some point, we will also be taken into that.
Yes.
So once you understand this type of information and you get back to the cultural elements of who we are as a people, and you don't really argue about the religious aspects, you disarm them because they want to argue a religious discussion, and I want to argue a cultural and anthropological discussion. And if we can have that type of discussion, they'll realize after a while that their religious arguments, they become religious themselves. It becomes a religion to bang against other religions.
Yes.
It takes that type of mindset in order to argue against that. But when we start talking about things that are a common denominator, where did we come from, who we are, what are the things that happen to us, what is our purpose, what is our destiny? When you start talking about things that have meaning to life, tangible, meaning to life, that once you absorb it, you can apply it and yield the results, it changes the entire discussion. But first, you have to learn how to listen to see what the concern is, do a root cause analysis, and now approach it by means of stripping away their religious outlook of what's going on and bring them back to a cultural, meaningful one, that if we focus on this, that's what's going to scare the oppressors, the system that's oppressing us. Not the religious argument, the cultural argument, and then banning with those that also have that type of understanding and being able to actually do something with that paradigm and shift up the community so that way we can blaze the trail and others can follow behind it.
Brother, you're deep.
Hey, when you have me sitting up here with these other brothers,
I know.
I gotta say something. You know what I'm saying? Because these brothers, all these brothers is fire. But what I would like to say, just so that people understand, so Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, right, has 3 major tenets, right? And everything that I do is based on these tenets. The first tenet is to reconstruct and restore culture. That is at the root level, right? Because a lot of times we see the branch, we see this, you know, the trees, we see the fruit, but we don't see the roots. So a lot of times the roots don't really get the acknowledgement that it deserves. So I realized because we have been robbed of our culture, not religion, robbed of our culture. And what they do is that they take the culture, the elements of the culture that is non-beneficial, they take the beneficial ones and they turn it into a religion, and they give you back the religion and tell you that the original parts is wrong and it's evil, don't do it. So you then abandon your inheritance for a property that's not even your name. That title's not even your name. You know what I'm saying? So I realized that if we are able to reconstruct our culture by doing reverse engineering. So what I do is I go to West Africa, from West Africa bring me back to Israel, and then from there have the template in order to take that information and see how it applies here. Because our brothers in West Africa, they have a different slew of issues. Some similar, some are not. But then we have some that are distinct to us that they don't have. And you mentioned one earlier about the Willie Lynch. Not just the Willie Lynch. What was the one that you were saying earlier about the culture shock thing?
Oh, Stockholm syndrome.
No, not Stockholm syndrome. You was talking about racism or something of that nature, or civil rights. You was talking about something like that. That element. So we have things that we face there that they have faced, but then there's a different form. Because I'm gonna give you an example of what I mean. And I'm gonna use Nigeria for example. So in Nigeria, you had a situation where after the British left, they put a different group of people in charge, but their physical presence was no longer there. In America, the physical presence is still here. Not the same exact people that was oppressing us, but their lineage. So which means that now we have a totally different thing that's going on. And now in Africa, the Chinese are moving in, and they're bringing industry, and then they're robbing our people of things because they're so poverty stricken, because they believe that they have to compete the same way the Western world does in order to be somebody. And that's a huge problem. So when I see brothers like Akon going back to his homeland and bringing his resources and investing in infrastructure, because that's what Africa needs. They need a great, and that's what we all the time. We have IP, they have CP.
Okay.
We have intellectual property, they have cultural property.
Yes.
And we cannot survive without either or, right?
Right.
So then I realized that when we go back to reconstruct the culture and restore the culture, and we can take that culture that we restored and test it in different communities to see what results that it yields, then we can say, look, this culture is good. In the Jewish realm, they call that halakha, which means that, like my brother Akweti Abba says, when you look at the pre-Israelite culture that we were doing in the land, it followed the people that follow with it.
Correct.
But then the people that stayed behind or came back and they stayed there, they developed something that was totally different because it pertained to whatever their circumstances was. We never lost it. When our ancestors came off that ship, that's when it became a problem. But before they did, they maintained it. That's this guy right here is a time capsule of our culture. A time capsule. Y'all know what a time capsule is, right? Yeah. You have it in one side. You said, look, in 100 years, we're going to plant it here, and somebody's going to get it. You know what the Most High said? He said that my people that's in the diaspora that I've scattered in America, I'm going to have time capsules in West Africa so when the awakening happens, they can come together.
Wow.
So we can reconstruct and restore the culture.
Yes.
And the second step from there is that once you have a common denominator in regards to culture, now you can build a community, a common unity, a communal society where everybody agrees to those cultural elements and it binds them to ethical, moral, economic, political, and social endeavors that is necessary for them to survive. And I'll give you an example of that. If you go to Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah chapter 29, and I use it all the time, verse 4 on, a letter was written to the Israelites that were in captivity.
Correct.
Not for them to sit and wait, but for them to be active. The only way that they could be active is that they had to not only fix the issues amongst themselves, but they also had to be very important in enacting change wherever they're at. Meaning that if we're Israelites, if we read the scriptures everywhere we went, we change things.
Yes, yes.
People look to you as the light.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So if we're sitting here as people here in America and people are only looking to us because there's something spiritual in us, we don't know it.
Right.
You see, if you look at African Americans in America today, we lead culture, we lead everything. We're the music, we're the best economical means of PR for any product. You give it to us, we'll take it somewhere else. But we think it's because, oh, we got swag, right? We cool. No, it's because there's something spiritual in you that they know. They're not going to tell you what it is. They're going to use your vessel as much as they can and burn you out. But when you realize why you got that swag, why? Because the Most High put it as a sign for the nations to know who's His. This is why they don't like us. This is why they oppress us. Because the moment we realize that that swag links us back to the Creator, it's game over.
Wow. Wow.
It's deep.
Game over.
So once we have these communities, not just domestically, but also abroad, now we can work together by exchanging resources and information and social ideas and things that we can do to become think tanks. See, that's what we're missing in our communities is a think tank. Now, I'm explaining. A lot of y'all know about the Bilderberg's Club, right? A lot of y'all know about CFR and all those other things, right? No? Yes, you do. I know you know about it. So anyway, these are, the reason why we're losing is because we don't have think tanks.
That's true.
The purpose of a think tank is to be able to introduce things that enact social engineering, either for the good or for the bad.
Correct.
So what happens is once we come into this awakening, because we've come into it so fast and we're so eager and excited, nobody's laying down a structured plan for everybody to follow to ensure that we're doing it for a positive reason and not just a negative. Sometimes it may even be neutral.
Which is what we need to do.
So as a think tank, you having this conference and bringing these people together, not just us. We are just the ones that's on the forefront. It's the people behind us that are pushing us with their strength. Because we on ourselves don't mean anything. But when you see that the think tank behind the community is the culture and those who can say, listen, what is the condition of our community and what ideas can we put forth to move them in the positive direction so that way we can continue to maintain our momentum. And as we maintain our momentum, we know that every moment that we're in, that we can make a difference if we understand what the common goal is. So once we're able to establish those communities where every other group, they're successful because they maintain that in cultural integrity, right? Then we can become autonomous. That's the third tenet. That's the final tenet. Well, what is autonomy? That is what the Most High was telling the prophet to let the people know in captivity, is that even though you're in captivity, that doesn't mean you can't be autonomous. Which means that you rely on your own for what you need. If I have to keep going outside of my community to get support, to get finances, to get understanding, to get coached, now we have a big issue. Because all the other ethnic groups that are succeeding and passing us, like, as we're going along, Lord, they're getting higher and higher. It's because they stay within their own community to get everything we need. If I sit here, and let's say that I was an Israelite. Oh, yeah. Oh, praise the Most High. If I sat here as
the brew link, I don't know where it's at, thebrewlink.com.
And let's say, for example, that I was just ignorant. Ignorant doesn't mean you're dumb, you're stupid. It just means you don't know, right? And I was to sit here with my brother Akweti Amma and say, oh, he's really a Hamite. He's infiltrated our community. You know what I'm saying? How detrimental would that be to us being successful? As long as we're fighting like this, they can sit back and say, oh, we ain't got to worry about those guys. They'll tear themselves apart.
Absolutely.
All we got to do is just turn them face to face, throw an issue or problem or something that's religious, and they'll fight over it, right? But once we start the research to say, wait a second, I hear what he's saying. You know what? That's my people that didn't leave off, that didn't get on that ship.
Wow.
They didn't get on the ship. And he's going to say, you know what? That's my people that went on that ship.
It's true.
And this brother told the story, and he showed the video last year. I seen it when you was with Rebirth of a Nation, where the king of Eli Ifa, right? He came to go visit the people of God who was residing there for a period of time. Thank you for showing that. I love that. That was residing there because of a degree of hospitality. Something that was already in their culture that we don't exercise today. What do I mean by that? I'm saying he left from Yoruba land, so-called, and went over to where the brothers were at in Ghana to say, hey, how y'all doing? Y'all good? The moment that we say the same thing, you know what? Our family is still over there in Africa. How are they doing? He goes say, you know what? My family's over there in America. How are they doing? And then we go and we also do the same kind of hospitality.
Absolutely.
And we link up and we concentrate resources and say, you know what? Man, y'all doing okay over there. Hey, we can use some of that.
Absolutely.
Man, y'all doing okay over there. We can use some of that. We will be undefeated.
Be nice to the stranger.
Because you never know. So by me calling him that, try to make him a derogatory term, I have nullified any success that I can obtain in the midst of Yah's people, because I'm also treating his people as a slave. And not just that, I'm selling them out. How am I selling them out? By me giving him that term, Ham, I'm telling everybody else, disregard this brother.
Correct.
I sold him out. Y'all get it. Sold him out. If he said the same thing about us, oh, those Americans are stubborn, they're ignorant, they don't care nothing about their culture. Sold us out to his own people. So there's no connection. And this is what is being perpetrated in American society and Western society, so we don't link together. So the moment that we get culture restored, we get the community's communal type of living and understanding and networking, like you said, the first internet, that type of networking, and we can move it up to autonomy, then if I ever need anything, I'm going to go to him before I go to anybody else. If he needs anything, he go to me before he goes to anybody else. And with these three tenets, we can still be functional within a society that's not our own, but enough so that way we can be preserved when we get redeemed by Yah.
There's a momentum. There's a momentum happening. There's a momentum happening. And when Brother Ron Shields, a.k.a. Divine Prospect, mentioned the academia and learning things, connecting it with culture and from the area of study that you have done, because we all have a difficulty when we try to defend it from a religious standpoint. We know that we fight with our family. We're the people of the book. I don't want to see that. But when now we're dealing with different types of evidence, culture, historical, academia, and we're putting this stuff together so that we can become more firm and rooted in who we are. Bless everybody that was able to get an awakening just from reading the scriptures. But the fact of the matter is, we are who we are, and we can do better than that by bringing these brothers like this together. So who we have here so far, let's give them a big hand.